all right?
How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm good. This is me, Michael Rectenwald, and I'm here with Julian Klepper,
Yeah,
and we're going to
I'm.
reverse our rules here. Actually, even though this is my YouTube channel, he's going to be the interviewer, more or less. Although
Yeah, that's right.
we're having a conversation about
Mm-hmm.
things. Julian and I go way back, and he's got some very, very precious footage of me in some other interview situations when I'm
Still
waiting.
not released. Yes.
But anyway,
Um,
let's take it away. I'll let Julian take it away.
Let me first by giving a little preface. I am not an academic, nor will I ever claim to be. I'm the child of one. I'm a filmmaker. I'm just curious about a couple things. I've had a long discussion with you about stuff, and there's a lot of stuff I'm curious about. You seem to be a very loved person right now. All sides seem to really be flocking towards you, Dr. Reck. People seem to be loving you.
You're kidding.
You're a magnanimous presence.
That's crazy.
Who's the weirdest support you've gotten? Just for my own curiosity.
Well, I mean, I guess it's pretty strange that I was invited to be on the Bill O'Reilly podcast, and I ended up sitting in Bill O'Reilly's chair in the studio and got my picture taken there. So they're loving me at Fox News, dude.
Because when I think of Fox News, I think of radical Marxists. That's exactly what I think of. Those two go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Is it weird to hear some of your how weird or difficult is it to hear some of the ideas and concepts that you have kind of being adopted by groups and parties that I know you don't agree with?
It's interesting. I mean, I made a critique, and I still continue to make a critique, as you know, of identity politics and social justice left, or, which is pejoratively called the social justice warriors. And that ideology, which I think has been adopted into the entire university system now across the country, and is now the basic official ethics and vocabulary of the university. It's strange to hear a lot of people giving me support coming from positions that I was not expecting it from. And also, I got to be frank. You say there are people flocking to me now. That's great, because I was, for a while there, man, I was really quite condemned by a lot of people.
You're even happy for support of people who normally don't. I mean, that I'm a moderately progressive person that stands on the edge of being progressive people. You're happy for any support, or is there?
What it was is at one point I was so roundly condemned by members of the left that I was, and also my positions being really mischaracterized by them tremendously. So that, when I received a lot of support from conservatives, Trump fans, and so on and so forth, it was welcome, because no one else was even respecting or protecting my right to say what I said, and no one else seemed to be advocates for actual academic freedom and free speech, except the people a lot of people on the right. And as I've told them through my Twitter account, I really appreciate it. I got to be honest, I really do. And I've met some very nice people from unexpected political provenances.
So let's go into that a little bit further as to what stances that you have that have put you on the fray of things. And there's a couple of things that I'm excited about, which I feel like a lot of people don't know. I mean, they know you for what you've been standing for right now, but there are a lot of deeper things, and you actually really do care about people a lot. And I don't. And what I find to be interesting, though, is that in talking with you and reading some of your stuff, you're not diametrically opposed to, I mean, and you can vocalize this yourself better than I can, to the basic concepts of intersectionality, or even some of the things that go into identity politics. It's how they manifest themselves in people's actions and behaviors and organizations.
Yeah.
That I see.
I mean,
there's
I think
a lot of
you mentioned intersectionality. That's a good place to start. Intersectionality, which is it's kind of like a theory, but it's more like a grid or a matrix that describes various ways that power intersects people in various ways, multi-dimensional ways, such that, for example, a person who is African American, female, and perhaps has a is not heterosexual, has various ways in which subordination is being expressed in the power matrix, right? So she's being, her identity is intersected by 3 vectors of power at least, right? Gender,
and
race.
There's the whole intersectionality world that isn't just so visible. There's mental disabilities.
Yes,
ableism, being able-bodied. That's even more visible. So there's stuff that is on the spectrum that is.
Yeah, there's all kind of different ways. Okay. So yeah, my contention is not with that analysis, and I don't discount those real vectors, if you will, or axes of oppression. That I don't suggest they're not there. What happens is the way intersectionality works in practice as a kind of scale. In other words, I think it's a very good sociological tool for analyzing various positionalities within the social structure. But the problem is when it's treated like a political tool, it ends up with a kind of, as I've put it elsewhere, a one-downsmanship or a more subaltern status seeking, more subaltern than now status seeking. So everyone is sort of trying to vie for the bottom because the bottom is somehow the top. In other words, if I can assert my status as more subaltern than yours based on these various vectors of intersection, then I can show that I am ethically, in some sense, superior to you, or that I deserve more political weight or political power or political consideration than you do. This status seeking, this subaltern status seeking, looking to try to get lower and lower and lower. Of course, this is the very basis of what's been called, rather pejoratively, the oppression Olympics. And it is not a good tool for anything other than, as I said, analysis. But once it gets into its usage in the social order as a means of sort of trying to claim various statuses as against others, and it's very divisive. And anybody that's been subjected to this, even people that have so-called played the game of intersectionality, have found out how divisive and really bitterly vitriolic and horrible it can become.
Why do you think that is?
Because it's a competition. Unfortunately, it's a competition in reverse. It's an inverted hierarchy that's being established. And whenever you have a hierarchy, you're always going to have pecking orders, and pecking orders leading to discrimination against others. It's just that it's an inverted hierarchy. So you take the social hierarchy that putatively exists in the world, and you flip it on its head, so the point being that you need to seek the bottom because, as you know, the bottom is going to become the top as the hierarchy is inverted. So this is competition, and it becomes a bitter competition, so that you have now very horrible things going on where, for example, trans women are in desperate battles with what they call TERFs, TERFs, or trans exclusionary radical feminists, and there's bitter battles going on between these two because the trans women are claiming a subaltern status beneath that of women and claiming that they really know what it's like to be a woman. And the trans so-called TERFs, I don't, that's a derogatory term as well. So I really don't like it. I'm using it with quotation marks, if you will. They are feeling extreme a judgment from these trans women who are suggesting that they're not feminist enough, So this is very ironic because these women say, well, we're the actual women here, at least at the outset, and you're telling us we don't know how to be women or feminists. It's pretty bizarre.
And just to further clarify, I mean, you're sympathetic to both sides there. You know what I mean?
In a way, yes.
That
I have nothing against trans people.
It's not easy either.
I don't know. I'm not a transphobic person at all. And I'm certainly not a misogynist. So what I think the issue there is that the issue there is a competition for status, a status-seeking competition that's being erected, or I shouldn't choose the word erected there. Excuse me. That's being set up there, and that status seeking is causing a tremendous amount of backbiting, vitriol, just horrible stuff. It's the opposite of solidarity, so it's dividing people as opposed to binding them together. It's very divisive. It's terrible. I'm not, and I'm not blaming the people that are involved. But I'm saying, and the problem is you can't reason with it, especially if you're coming from my status standpoint, because I'm just told that what I'm saying, I'm only saying because I'm this or that. I'm a white male and I'm heterosexual. I'm a cisgendered male, whatever. All those things which amount to an effective original sin, which I can't expiate no matter what, the guilt of, that is. So that's the problem too, is that it causes a kind of identification and a conflation of identity with content. The content of one's speech, the content of one's expression becomes conflated with one's actual identity, so that one can't say anything that isn't then attributed to strictly one's identity, which is to say that it equates to identity. So I can say nothing but white, straight male, white, straight male, white, straight male. That's it. Everything I say is merely reduced to white, straight male.
Yeah, it kind of. I can see how you can you see how that would be hard for people then to hear you, though. You know what I mean?
Oh yes, it's very hard. They can't hear me. They shut it off immediately, and they just say, "Well, he's a white straight male." Now, if the interesting thing is, who the hell are they to say what I am? I never declared I'm a white straight male. I just am just talking. I don't walk around and say, "Look, listen to me. I'm a white straight male." I could very well, for all they know, be trans. What do they know? How do they know that? Have they inspected my gonads? No, I don't think so. So, at least not to my not to my knowledge, anyway.
Okay, yeah.
So
fun job. So yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of things that even intersectionality that aren't seen. You know what I mean? Yeah, your mental capabilities, which are high, but you could be struggling for incredible mental disorders or other various things that have produced trauma in you that have made a lot of things.
That's correct. How do people know what anyone has suffered? Okay, like even this is why I don't judge people. I just imagine if a white, straight, super rich, aristocratic kid, in effect, grew up in this a mansion, just with servants, whatever. Yet their father molested them on a daily basis. Where's the privilege? I'm sorry, I don't see it. So my point being is not to discount anyone's suffering or anyone's exploitation or feelings of oppression or actual oppression. The point is that we really don't have a scale for it. It doesn't exist. There is no way to actually measure it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you can't measure oppression because it's not quantifiable in a way. So therefore, the measurement of each other on some sort of a scale of oppression, some sort of a rating system of oppression, which intersectionality effectively amounts to, is really problematic.
And so the trouble is if you ask me, the people in charge of society, the people who have been in charge of society.
You mean like me?
Well, no, well, they look like you.
Yeah, some of them do, yeah.
They're and it has been you, and they're the ones who have been creating these rules for a long bit of time. They have way more money than you.
Yeah, that's what I'm sure about.
That's the other thing.
Yeah, that's the big thing there, buddy.
Yeah, and so it's easy. So I mean, it's white, rich, for the most part, straight men who are older, who further perpetuate who are the ruling class, who have been, have continued to be, have perpetuated these ideas and of patriarchy. It's easy to find that villain, and it's true. They are, in my mind, a lot of them are the villain. Uh-huh. You know, and so that's an easy concept for me to hold on to as a progressive. That's an easy visual, and so you're kind of you're actually like a opposite. You're. It seems like oftentimes that you're an exception to the rule. Oftentimes, you know what I mean. You acknowledge that these things exist. You acknowledge that these worlds do exist. While there's a whole large, big block of men who seem to be in charge of the world that don't acknowledge these things exist.
Yeah.
And so, how do you separate those two? How do you do that?
How do I separate the two? Those who acknowledge these things exist, and those who don't? Or
yeah, not you is someone
how does one? How does one?
Yeah.
Well, I say first of all, one should be careful about the issue of whiteness because, and the apparent homology or homogeneity of white people and their apparent similarity to the super dominant class. Okay. And in that class, by the way, there are significant differences and divergences. That's another thing. I'll get to that later. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of competition within that class, too. It's not strictly some sort of a ruling bloc who has complete agreement with each other. There's a great deal of conflict inside of that. In fact, I suggest that recently that class, and it may be still in effect going on, it's undergoing a kind of civil war right now. I'll get into that later.
Okay.
But the way of understanding this is to suggest that what happened here in the United States after the Emancipation Proclamation was that there was an appeal made to whites by this class, this ruling class or elite, however you want to refer to them. I have some friends now on the right who don't like the word ruling class or the phrase ruling class. They refer to the elite. Fine, I don't care what you call them. Ruling elite, whatever. They did put out an appeal to rural and urban whites of the working class or working people and suggested to them that they were, in effect, to identify themselves with their masters, if you will, rather than with their black brothers and sisters. And that identification caused a great deal of division in the main masses of the working people.
How did they do that?
They did it with severe propaganda. This is really well documented. They actually, used real propaganda to vilify blacks, to make them look like the enemies to white workers, to make them feared, to make them loathed, to make them dreaded, to tell people that they were trying to get their jobs, they were trying to take their positions, own their property, things like that. This was a deliberate, explicit campaign. Okay, now let's remember the people who owned slaves were not these people. They were not these working people. They were not at all working people. They were rich aristocrats, in effect, or bourgeoisie, whatever you want to call them. They were class. They were a very high class people who owned a tremendous amount of property, and of course, part of that property happened to be people. So what I'm getting at here is that there was a deliberate propaganda campaign to drive a wedge between white workers and black workers. It's a significant issue, and this is the real cause of the persistent race issues in the United States. Because even earlier, during slavery, at one point there were white slaves as well. There were white slaves as well as black slaves held in the South. They got released because it became illegal to have white slaves. But at one point, they really didn't. These slave owners really didn't discriminate about slave colors. They didn't care as long as they were slaves. So racism is an effect of a deliberate campaign to drive a wedge between white and black people in the main masses of the people by the white ruling elite. Absolutely. And they did it purposefully. They did it deliberately, consciously, and as a conspiracy, if you will. I don't care if you call it a conspiracy. It is one. It was one. So one thing to notice is that when you talk about whites, don't associate whites, as the rulers have tried to do, even though the whites may sometimes identify with their rulers more than they do with their black brothers and sisters. That has been an ideology that's been inculcated in them for centuries now. So don't mistake them for the boss. They're not the boss. They're being duped. They have been for years. So you can't look at whites like a homogeneous block any more than you should look at blacks as a homogeneous block. That's racism, right? If you look at a people and decide who they are based on what they look like and their phenotypical characteristics based on markers that have been traditionally referred to as racial markers, that's a racist or a racialist notion. So
when you said you can't really be racist if you don't have power.
I don't agree with that, because after all, listen, most of the white people that are racist don't have power either. They don't have any real power. The power they're relying on is the power of their rulers to do something to black people. If they're really worried about black people, it's not them that do that. Let them try to actually do something to black people, and they'll be in jail. Right?
Yeah.
Look what we've outlawed, things like, there is the KKK, and there are these, nefarious alt-right, alt-white, whatever the hell you want to call them, organizations.
Yeah.
But those people have no real power. They're just propagating racial hatred and racial ideology. But the
police have power.
The police have power. That's right.
And so when people get angry,
as agents of the state, the police have power as agents of a much more powerful state that's behind them. Even the campus cop has power because the local police force is behind him, and the state police is behind them, and the feds are behind them. They're all backed up by other greater power behind it, right?
Yeah. But that's the rare. Is that would you say that's a rare confluence where? Well, it's not that rare. Where the lower class, typical white male actually does have power.
When he's a cop.
Yeah,
that's true. Absolutely, they have power. They have power. Yeah, I'm talking about like your rural white, person that like living in a shack. Look at Appalachia, for crying out loud. Those are white people. They might be racist. I don't know. I haven't talked to any. I should. I would like that someday. That's on my bucket list.
Yeah, your next interview.
Yeah.
Uh,
But I mean, they
so
don't
is
have
it
real power, but they could still be racist. So I don't buy that idea that you have to have power to be racist. I don't think that's true. Racialism, or at least racialism, is a kind of ideology that's thinking in racialized terminology and belief. You know, so anybody can engage in this. And I know the sort of SJW or social justice notion that racism is prejudice plus power or some silly formula like that. This isn't Kool-Aid we're making here. I mean, this ideology is very, very complicated in how it operates, and it's not, it can do almost anything. Ideology takes all kinds of shapes and goes into all kinds of places in different people's heads of all types of, people. I mean, you have actually some Africans, for example, and I've known some who are deliberately and consciously racist against blacks in the United States. They think of them as lazy. They have all the same. They use all the same epithets as poor white rural so-called supposedly racist people hold. So they don't. Where's their power? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I guess. I mean, it's semantics, and semantics are important. You know what I mean?
I don't think it's just semantics, because we're talking about words as signifiers for real things, and I think that the question is whether those things are there.
Yeah, I could go in a little deeper in this, but I want to kind of step back to move forward.
Okay.
So I guess I'm curious, is it as simple as they, meaning the elite or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah.
They keep their power way easier by dividing us and dividing the masses.
Yeah.
And separating us, and we somehow then begin to perpetuate the divisions.
The divisions, that's right. And we dream up theories like intersectionality, which just so happen to work so favorably for them.
Well, it's once again, you don't disagree with intersectionality.
No, as I said, it's an analytical tool. It has something to say. I think in the hands of a sociologist or even a social theorist, it's definitely interesting, and it works to understand the layers or the different ways that power intersects people differently.
Mm-hmm.
And it problematizes the idea of race, class, and gender, and sexual orientation and ability as homogeneous wholes that can be ranked one above the other in importance. All that is those are very good insights, I think. It's the problem is that when it comes to be used as a political notion or ideology, that is something that people use for a politics, that it becomes problematic. It's disastrous, actually. And I think there's more and more people falling out of it as I speak. I mean, I hear feminists coming to me and others that say, yeah, this intersectionality has been the root of our evil here.
Mm.
Not our evil, but, the root of evil in our communities.
Yeah. And so I guess I'm also just further curious. So, essentially, so the elite divides us, then, we further propagate these divisions. But people, including me a lot, propagate these divisions or say, hey, I'm proud because I'm black, which I'm not black, but it's not here. I'm proud. So you may have divided me first, but I found some sort of pride in this. I'm proud because I'm gay. I'm proud because I have this. I'm proud because I have this community behind me. And
that's fine.
There's a sense of strength and well-being that comes from that.
No, that's nothing wrong with that. I mean, this is the truth about the fact that even though identity is somewhat always communal, it is never strictly individual, right? Because you can't be who you are without somebody being who you're not. Okay, so identity is always is always partaking in the other, right? I always use this. Give me a little bit of a foray here, a little bit of not a foray, sort of a segue here, if you will. I always give this example in my classes. Okay. A equals A. Okay. That is the basic equation or logical proposition of identity. A equals A. Okay? Now, the thing is, what makes A A? Is it A that makes A, or is it something else that makes A A? It's actually not A that makes A. It's not A that makes A. A is A because of not A. Okay?
Yeah.
In other words, identity has no meaning other than by virtue of its distinction from something else, right?
This is sort of the Hegelian dialect.
This is Hegelian, absolutely. You put your finger right on it. This is Hegel. This was Hegel all the way. Now, but here's the irony here. A, therefore, because it depends on not A for its identity, actually partakes of not A. And therefore, A is, in effect, partly not A as well. A's very identity is dependent upon what it's not. In other words, you said you're black. You're black only because whiteness is. There's no blackness without white. Similarly, there's no whiteness without black. So these things they partake of their other at base. Yeah. Okay. So in a sense, if A is not A, okay, if A is not A, there's no A.
So what would we have instead then? I feel like part of being a human is inherent in our humanness.
Yeah.
Is this binary classification of things. And that's, when we had extra time of being humans, we're like, that's rock, that's thing. We passed down that language.
No, that's correct. You're right. And some evolutionary psychologists, of which I'm not one, just be careful here because they're condemned as racist. They would say, yeah, the binary thinking comes from our long evolutionary history of having to divide things into categories quickly, because they were risky. If you didn't say bad, good, quickly, because that might kill you and that will not, then you could die. So binary thinking became a survival mechanism, absolutely. Because we are humans who have to produce our survival on the basis of decision making, which is not the same as other species on our planet. Whatever other differences we have, that's one of them. So we've had to have a binary mode of operation. Indeed, we do that. We've talked about this before. I remember we talked about this very issue and how binary thinking is very deeply programmed in us. But we can overcome it, is my point. What we know, we're not going to kill each other if necessarily. Like we know, for example, I can overcome my binary thinking that black is bad if I had it. I'm not saying I have. But it is an attempt to program. That attempt to program it has been there. I know that racism exists because I know it's an ideology that's propagated that I feel trying to get me sometimes. You see? To be honest about it, I don't think people are racist per se. I think that people are sick. If you look at it this way, racism is not an inherent property of a person. It is an ideology that infects people to greater or lesser degrees, which actually has to be resisted actively, personally, by the person. You can become racist if you let it happen. But it's not really a property of some genetic makeup that you have. That's racist itself to say that. Oh, you're a racist. In what sense am I a racist? Better to say you've imbibed a racist ideology, or you've allowed a racist ideology to infiltrate your thinking. That's better to say that than to call somebody a racist, because there's nothing inherent about them that makes them such. They've imbibed it. It's been inculcated in them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if we're going to say that racism is genetically determined, then we have a real problem.
Yeah.
Right? Because then how are we going to overcome it?
So I want to move forward on a couple different concepts that I'm curious about.
Yeah.
So you love safe spaces. That's one of the things you advocate for.
Yeah, right.
You're just like, I want a safe space everywhere you go. You actually need one for yourself, literally. But it's interesting. So in reading your article,
so you were being ironic at first at the opening when you said everybody loves me. You meant the opposite, didn't you?
Yes, that was sarcasm. Yes.
Oh, you son of a bitch! You got me, man. Damn, I was starting to get hopeful.
So in your article, you're not a big fan of safe spaces. No. I grasp that. But in your article, you said that it traces the concept that gay and lesbian bars of the 60s in Los Angeles and elsewhere,
right,
where they were able to have kind of a safe space away from patriarchal thought and expression.
Yeah.
And when I hear that, I'm like, that sounds dope. That sounds like a really powerful
I have nothing against it. In fact, I try to make that clear in that article. Yeah. How did it come off?
I wanted you to further delve into the concept that you don't have anything against it, and then I was curious about when did you have when did it start to be something deleterious?
I don't have anything against it in the context that you're referring to. For example, if gay people or lesbians or black women or black lesbian women want to meet in groups that exclude other people of a type they deem dangerous or pernicious in some sense, they should have every right to do it. It's actually guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States as well. It's called.
Do you think it also could be constructive too?
Yeah, it's called the right of assembly, free assembly. So they should have every right to do so. What I'm talking about is in the context of the university where it becomes a problem. Because in the university, it becomes a way of cordoning people off and consigning themselves to sort of intellectual and cultural containers of homogeneity so that they don't have to confront ideas or people's thoughts or even social interaction that they don't like. And that is problematic in the context of a university because universities are supposed to be not safe spaces, but exchange spaces. So I have founded a group with a number of people, I shouldn't put this in the singular, a number of people, like-minded people. We have founded a group called Exchange Spaces, in which we are trying to propagate the notion that we need to set up spaces where exchanges take place, not where hiding takes place. And we're talking specifically, and mostly I should say, about the university, but we want to kind of bridge the gap between the university and the community as well. We want to have exchange spaces, which are obviously safe in the sense that we don't want anybody to come there and kill us or anyone else. Now, everybody wants that kind of safety. What I'm talking about is the safety that people are trying to demand from ideas and from expression that they deem problematic or offensive. That I don't think the university should be a safe space, or should really.
Okay, so I got a couple more questions about that. So let's say I was part of a black student union.
Yeah.
Hey,
let me put this on hold a minute. I got to turn on some more light. Okay.
Okay.
Let me just put it on
light here.
Well, I need some more light in this room.
We're waiting.
All right, that's better. Okay, yeah, I'll just do some editing on that part. Maybe I'll send it to you and have you do it. All right.
No, you can do it. I'm pretty sure you're capable of that. Okay. I won't tell you. So I guess what I'm curious about is I don't see why it has to be a binary. Why can't you have safe spaces and exchange spaces?
And exchange spaces. Okay. Again, I really would have nothing against safe spaces of a sort within the university. Like, for example, if a bunch of students say, like Chinese students want to meet without, just using any group, without interference from whatever, anybody, that's fine. What I'm talking about is the spaces that they're erecting adjacent to speaker halls or halls where speakers are speaking as a way to get away from those people, Also, I think some of the spaces that the safe spaces erected on the in the aftermath of Trump's election, I think are kind of pathetic in a way. I think, in other words, do we want to turn the university into a kind of triage unit where the main concern is not with rigorous and vigorous exchange of ideas, but rather with protection from thoughts that are deemed harmful or pernicious potentially. And that's what I'm talking about. I don't believe the university should set itself up on the terms demanded by safety intellectually and socially and psychologically. I think that is a mistake. It's a conflict, I think, and I think this goes to the heart of the conflict. I think it exists between what Jonathan Haidt, a colleague at NYU, calls the conflict between the Social Justice University, SJU, and the Truth University, TU. Social Justice University is a university based on social justice as the main object. Truth University is based on truth as the object of the university, and he thinks, and I think, that there's contradiction between the two, and they can't work together. They can't be. You can't have social justice as the dominating ideology of the university and be an institution whose main mission is the pursuit of knowledge about reality.
Why not?
Because if you erect social justice as the primary object, you will put blockades in front of certain paths of investigation in advance. You'll preclude.
Why does it have to be that way, though?
Because social justice ideology holds certain things to be sacrosanct, and beyond inquiry, beyond question. They're dogmatically held views. For example, about gender, that, for example, gender is a social construction all the way down, that there's no biological basis for gender. And they go so far now as to say there's no such thing as biological sex difference in human beings. If this is held onto, then you see, if this is a proclaimed dogma of the university, if the university becomes a social justice university, then these kind of dogmas will be very much like Catholic dogmas were in the Middle Ages. They will erect kinds of barriers against Copernican thought or Galileo, modern day Galileos of sorts. You see what I'm saying?
Can I propose just a quick alternative?
Go ahead.
So it still sounds like, and I can't speak directly for a social justice university, whatever that look like, or the definite viewpoints of being a social justice warrior, whatever that actually means, or social justice is. What is there a nicer, less pejorative term than social justice warrior?
Yeah, well, I call them social justice activists, I think, or
social justice activists.
Yeah.
Well, what if I was a person, which I am, which I agree with a lot of social justice activism stances, but I don't hold them as I don't hold my views as something either that or that. I hold maybe I'm a sliding scale.
I see.
Where maybe, and my scale may change based on the information or situation. I may 90% agree with something, and then I understand that 10% of the time I may not. Can I hold conflicting ideologies at the same time and still be social justice activists and still care about truth?
Let me put it this way. When Charles Murray was speaking at Middlebury, I don't know if you've seen the footage of what happened up there. Middlebury College. Charles Murray is a co-author of the book The Bell Curve, which came out in the 90s, early 90s, I think 95 actually, in which he argued that see, one of the things I want to get across here about Charles Murray is that his book, The Bell Curve, was not primarily about race. There's 2 pages in the book that deal with race, but he's called a eugenicist and a racist and all this stuff. Anyway, the bell curve's main argument is that there is a bell curve of IQ. Okay, he does place a lot of emphasis on IQ as a real thing. And he correlates IQ with success in modern society. He believes that most people that have high IQs do well relative to their peers. And people with low IQs don't do well. Now, he did correlate IQ also with race. It also goes on a bell curve that, Asians were highest on the curve, then came whites, then came blacks, I don't know. So Hispanics, then blacks. Yeah, so there was an articulation of race as a criteria or a qualification of IQ or intelligence. In that sense, there is a racialism to what he was saying. And he doesn't problematize the issue of race at all in the book. But let me ask you this. Knowing what I just told you about this speaker, and even if you took a more negative stance towards what he's written, would you scream at him in a hall and not let him get a word out if he was invited speaker at your university? Would you chant endlessly while he tried to speak, not letting him get a word out of his mouth? Would you have a university that shuts down ideas that are unpopular in that milieu? Or would you let it be aired? And I'll tell you whether you're a social justice warrior or not.
Well, okay. Well, I would let it be aired, but then I would have someone who has the counter viewpoints up there on stage with him after when he's doing that to argue that point, because there's a lot of stuff to go against what he said.
Yes, absolutely, and that's exactly my view. My view. I think that if you think it's a bad idea, you should let it be vocalized and then debate it. But that's not what these people want. They don't. First of all, these people that are holding up signs saying racist, eugenicists, and blah blah blah, they never read his books. It's very obvious they've never read his books. And then even in the press, NYU just did an article about him, and they mistakenly said the main premise of his book was a racial equivalence or characterization of IQ along racial lines. That's not the main criteria. That's not the main argument in the book at all. The main argument in the book is that IQ correlates closely with success. There's so many problems with that. First of all, what's success? Second of all, what is IQ? Does it really exist? As we both know, there's cultural inputs there that are really hard to measure, and that IQ really is not so simple as some sort of obvious, clear, neutral mechanism to measure intelligence. Let's be real, right? I agree with that. But let these things be argued rather than shutting him down and being crazy. And then when the guy went into another room, they had a setup where he would speak to a camera instead, with the doors locked and everything. They beat on the doors. They smashed and kept screaming through there so he could barely get to get audible. Then when they came out to leave the campus, they were mobbed by these people. And one of the women, who happens to be a feminist, who was one of the professors that brought him to campus, they pulled her hair and put her in a hospital because they tore her neck muscles. She had to get a neck brace. This is what they're doing, and that is what I'm saying. That's social justice ideology at work.
Can I stop you there? I feel like you're using one or even a couple specific occasions to paint some broad strokes about
it's happening all over the place, though. It happened at Berkeley when Milo Yiannopoulos. You certainly know about that one.
Yeah, but who's to say that these people who are actually protesting are actually representative of social justice activism? Why are these the people that we're painting solely as the representatives of that, versus a person like me who also would say that I am a social justice activist?
I think it's a spectrum, of course, right? But it is an expression of a particular ideology, is my point. And some people.
Okay, so I guess I wish that we could just be more.
Let's put it in an analogous setup. Some people that are racist go out and burn crosses on somebody's yard. Some people who are racist in the past, and maybe even the present, attempt to lynch black men. Some people who are racist do nothing. They just hold grumblings in their, and maybe mumble under their breath to their wife and kids. But they don't take any action. So similarly with social justice ideology, some people that hold the ideology will go crazy and block a speaker from speaking, and some will pull somebody's hair and actually try to beat him up, punch him in the face, pepper spray him as he tries to go in the building, as happened with Gavin McInnes at NYU. And some people will just protest peacefully, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with, in my opinion. That's part of free speech too. But when you start infringing upon others' rights because you don't like what they have to say, that shouldn't be allowed. B, it is the extreme behavior, but it's extreme behavior that is generated at base by social justice activism ideology.
That's why I still have a little bit of a time is just taking that intellectual leap. Is to say the people that are doing the actions are exactly representative of the entire culture. I
don't think they're representative of the entire culture. Like I said, they're operating on the basis of a particular ideological system. And as I said, some people that imbibe the ideology and believe in it and cherish it don't act this way at all. But some do. But they're both under the same ideology. That's demonstrable by the beliefs that they hold.
Well, I'm saying that I would consider myself to some degree to be a social justice activist that cares about truth, and I can hold these conflicting ideologies, so I don't fit exactly within the realm.
That's possible.
Of what
absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely possible. I mean, first of all, I'm actually interested in social justice too, as you know.
There we go.
Okay. But I'm saying that there's a particular constellation of mechanisms and ideas around this, what I'm calling this kind of social justice in quotes, okay, that is pernicious and doesn't lead to social justice at all. So maybe you're not one of these people because you actually don't agree with the idea of shutting down academic freedom if you don't like the expressions that are going to come out of it. You don't believe in violently opposing speakers or beating them up on their way in the door, apparently, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. So, but see, the social justice ideology, or ideologues, let's put it this way, they have made it clear that any means necessary to stop somebody whose speech they deem to be fascist or racist is allowable. Any means necessary to shut them down from speaking is allowable.
Yeah. I guess so. My problem is just when you say they, and versus earlier, you're very specific in how you categorize or how that is a small set of those people.
Yeah, it's a narrow band of the people. Yeah, I'm just saying that
it's hard. It's hard to. I understand how that can also be hard to always continually say this narrow band with the people that oftentimes associate themselves with social justice ideology, instead of saying A.
Yeah.
But I think that's when some of the problems where or pushback that does happen is when there is a larger categorization made when something there is a lot of complexity within.
All right, that's fair.
And with that said, here's my thing. I'm going to push back on you on a couple things. Just that, not push back. I'm just curious about in debating you with it. Is tone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You and your piece.
You're tone policing me now, as they say. That's a social justice thing.
No. Yeah, you're going to get I'm not policing.
Okay.
I'm asking questions.
Okay, that's fine.
That's the extent. Is I just so I'm gonna when talking about the social justice activists, you say they're replete with crayons, coloring books, and therapy pets.
Yeah.
Smile, you like this.
Yeah. I thought that was nice phrasing, actually.
I mean, it's funny, but yeah. But it does, for me, as someone that does care about this stuff, and I know you actually do care about this stuff just in a different way, it feels like it's when you use aggressive tone like that, or you even said it's pathetic to do something like that. It feels like, and I can understand how it could be interpreted as feeling like it's pejorative. You know what I mean? It can be like
well, okay. Like, here's the thing with the therapy pets and the crayons and the coloring books, and on occasion pacifiers in the safe spaces at question. These are just facts. I mean, this happens. There were many safe spaces erected after the election of Trump that included these as appurtenances in the safe spaces. If it's laughable, it's not because I'm saying it; it's because it's real. In other words, I'm not actually making this up. These are true facts about these spaces. Now, if that's pathetic,
but people are hurt. Who cares if they use crayons to express their feelings, or literally as an arts educator myself, or they have a therapy pet. People are very much hurt by with Trump, which is signifying like this terrible direction the country is headed in. You know what I mean? I understand how they could be hurt. What's wrong with having a fucking crayon or a pet thing?
Okay, I mean, I say there's nothing wrong with having a crayon or a therapy pet, but what I'm saying is, should the university be the auspices under which such spaces are erected? Because after all, listen, you're also forgetting the fact that there are people in the universities, not me, but others, who actually are Trump supporters. So how about how they feel when they see the whole university suggesting, and the administration down, like Andy Hamilton, the president of NYU does, and the dean of my program, and others throughout the university, who suggest that everybody must feel this way. Therefore, we're going to have these spaces for healing and all this kind of stuff, or teaching the election. And it's a very therapeutic model, but it's also suggestive of the idea that that the most people are going, that this is our ethos, and therefore, and it's been violated by Donald Trump. Well, that's a very biased position to adopt for a university. A university should not be taking such stances. It should not be suggestive of the idea that we have an official doctrine, and that doctrine is that such and such a political idea or ideology is anathema to us. That is actually not right. That's a religious position, because the university needs to be secular in the sense that it doesn't take a stand with reference to these various partisan positions, you see?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if Donald Trump started advocating, the genocide of Jews or something, which some people have suggested he would, which I think is ludicrous, then
yes. He's thinking about it. He just won't say it out loud.
No, I don't think so. Come on. Or I've had friends that got into a lot of fights because they were saying, death camps are next. And come on, I mean, give me a break. Then I'd say the university, based on its value of human universal freedom and equality, yes, should intervene in something like that. But we're not even close to that. We're just dealing with right populism here. And it's
that's debatable, but to which I won't go into. It's like how far we actually are away from that. I guess. If a university is supposed to be like, it's not supposed to be just. I guess you said it's engaging in therapeutic models.
Yeah,
and I don't see what's the problem with that. If so many people are hurt by something. Well,
first of all, the presumption that they should be heard is the first question. Okay. They're assuming that most of the people, if not all of the people in that university, are opponents of Donald Trump. What about those who actually supported him? Shouldn't they be considered in this kind of directive that what if Hillary Clinton had won?
What if
Wait,
university offered
let me
Clinton
finish.
had won?
What if Hillary Clinton had won? Would they have safe
Yeah.
spaces for those who were traumatized by that? And why not?
So what if we had both? They probably wouldn't.
They wouldn't.
But what if
for example, I could say that if Hillary Clinton won, frankly, I think that feminists should be more worried about that than Donald Trump, and I'll tell you why. Because Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation has tremendous and deep ties to the Saudi Arabian sheiks, to the Saudi Empire and the Saudi family. And the Saudi family perpetrates one of the most oppressive regimes against women in the face of the earth. Okay?
Yeah.
They had, and they donated tens of millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation. And there's no outrage about that. So, see, it's a selective outrage that's really problematic.
It's a charity.
It's a charity, but it's a charity
that does a lot of great work.
But they took money from people that are doing a lot of evil, and that sanctions their evil in effect. Because if you take money from Hitler or the Nazis, you're sanctioning the Nazis, right? Would you agree? Let's say they were taking money from the Nazis. Say the Nazi Party existed today in a big way, and they were running a country, and you were running a charitable foundation. Would you accept money from that country, from the leaders of that country?
I mean, it's really complicated.
Would you though?
In that scenario,
yeah.
Would I accept money from Nazis?
Yeah.
From my charity?
Yeah.
What if my charity was to take down Nazis? You know what I mean?
What if it wasn't? Because there's nothing about the Clinton Foundation that's trying to take down Saudi Arabia or the Sharia law under which they operate, which is very oppressive to women.
But what if it was meant to empower women in different countries to some degrees and give them rights and education and power, whether not specifically in Saudi Arabia? It's complicated. I don't know if I have an answer unless I was put in that situation.
Well, I don't think that I would. And I'll tell you why. Because what it does is sanctions those regimes. Not in the sanction. There's two meanings of the word sanction. One is to basically, essentially, chastise. And then the other one is to actually approve. So there's antonyms. That's very odd, but language is like that. It's an actual sanctioning or approval of that regime, I think, and that is to me more pernicious than supposedly grabbing some woman's twat. Excuse my language, but
I'm just for so I don't get triggered. I'm setting up my own safe space right here.
Yeah,
I'm gonna try and keep away from Hillary and whatever that number 45's name is.
Okay.
But I want to stay back onto tone.
Okay.
Do you think, and this is where I feel like, and I feel like when I am able to talk to you about these things versus like reading some of the things, you're more aggressive in your writing.
Oh yeah, I can be a polemic bulldog, no question.
Yeah. Do you think that? I mean, that's. I think that puts a lot of people off. And do you think that's best for your message or for your ideas? Which, when you really break down and you hear further, I think a lot of those people would actually agree with. You know what I mean?
What did you think of the tone of the last piece you read? Which was what? I think you read the resecularizing the university, right?
Yeah.
What was the tone?
I thought you tamped it down a little bit more, which I liked. And you even go into the concept that Jonathan, who suggested that I moderate my tone and use less incendiary, more academic, conditional language, the contemporary equivalent of, I don't know how to pronounce this dude,
George Holyoake, yeah.
George Holyoake's approach. Yeah, I agree with John. Okay.
Yeah. I think that essay represents that a bit too, right? I think, and you're not referring to my essays. I think we should be clear here. You're a friend of mine on Facebook, and this is where I make these highly charged, rhetorical, short, aphoristic drop these aphoristic bombs, right? And
Yeah.
and Twitter. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, Twitter.
on those types of, and I even say that in the essay. Don't expect my Twitter pronouncements to be any less strident or anytime soon. So I think that I'm trying to say that I think that both a strident tone in some cases and a more academic and qualified articulation in others are appropriate in different ways. One of the things I'm trying to get across here is that civility as a code word for has been a code word for repression. Okay, and the left complains about it when the right uses it, but they never see the irony when they use the same language to try to censor others. They use the word civility. Civility is a way of trying to tamp down views that one doesn't like. They use the word civility. That's not civil. They'll say that's not civil language or that's incivil, as that committee that denounced me, the committee in my program denounced me for being incivil, amongst other things, having no evidence, which I will just put on the record again. I had plenty of evidence. They just don't know what it is because they don't read, apparently. Excuse my tone there, but I'm just really frustrated at people criticizing me who don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I'll put it like that.
Fair enough. Yeah, I still, I'm just gonna err where it's just like it's purposely off-putting sometimes. You know what I mean? You're making a point with it, but I wonder if you're like,
it's confrontational. It's definitely confrontational. Some of my strategies.
Confrontational.
Yeah, confrontational. Yeah, it's trying to provoke. It's provocative. Yeah, I'm trying to provoke and maybe trigger people actually slightly.
Yeah, I guess when I hear that, regardless if it's you, and I hear someone doing that, like the first thing I sort of do is I shut off.
All right. Yeah.
And I think I'm representative of a lot of people.
What I tried to do, let me try to characterize what I try to do with some statements like that. What I'm trying to do is be accurate and at the same time say something that's quite edgy, but is also true as I see it. Okay? So I don't deliberately exaggerate anything, but I use as pointed and poignant language as I possibly can find and muster. I take a great deal of time crafting these little aphorisms that I write on Facebook and Twitter. And because I think that, that's a particular mode or genre of writing that I think is valuable. I mean, this is what Nietzsche went to in his later years. After he got a typewriter, he started writing much shorter, pithier little aphoristic passages. And so I think there's a place for that, and there's a place for longer disquisitions that are more dispassionate, that explain things in more detail and are less confrontational. I will take that under advisement, though. I will take your advice. I will take what you're saying under advisement, because my object is actually not to get people to shut down. My provocation is to get people to think and to shake them up sometimes into thinking differently. So as I've put it elsewhere, I'm trying to undermine ideologies of various types. And sometimes it takes a kind of purposeful disorientation of people in order to do that. Mm-hmm. Purposefully disorienting them with language, if possible.
Yeah. I guess it's hard when there's so much. There's just so much information out there, and I could just click from one thing to the next thing, and then I could easily. And I'm victim to immediately categorizing something. I see something, or I see one thing and I just shut it off, and I'm just like,
you can go from one thing to another, and people can now, and that's part of the problem. And I think it's also part of why people's rhetoric gets more and more incendiary with the web, because the competition, to be frank, the meme space is limited but the number of memes are almost endless. So there's a Darwinian process going on whereby people are trying to get their meme to to stick, and they're using language as forcefully as possible in order to be the meme that makes it. The meme that winnows its way through and survives. It gets a lot of likes and actually, retweets on Twitter, for example. But it's interesting because you're right. Because one of the things I did is after one day of being attacked, almost a whole night, it went on. After I went on the contributing factor of the O'Reilly podcast, at the same time I made a few statements about Milo Yiannopoulos. And I basically said if he were a liberal, the people that are attacking him now would be defending him. And I was roundly condemned. Oh my God, these people were attacking me. And then they were putting bullseyes on people were using my picture, putting a bullseye on it and sending it back to me on Twitter. Stuff like that on my head.
Yeah.
And it went on. I had two people, me and my colleague, friend. It took us all night to block all these people. I was being attacked by hundreds and hundreds, if not, tens of, almost, probably 1,000 people all night. It took all night to block them all. So the next day I wrote a passage about how traumatizing that was. And that actually became, and it wasn't an aggressive tweet or statement at all. It was a long Facebook post, but I then took the picture of it and put it on Twitter. That tweet got, 3,000 retweets, and that was probably my biggest tweet. But it's interesting because it verifies your statement, your contention that maybe if you become less aggressive and somewhat passive or show a kind of sensitivity side a little bit more, which very well, I have both,
Yeah.
I'm a poet, for Christ's sake, as well,
Yeah.
So I can express it that way too, and that really did work. That flew all over the place, that one.
Yeah.
So okay, I'm gonna take that under advisement.
Next time, let's write some little poetry notes with some brownies to your colleagues and MIUs.
Okay, yeah, you had mentioned this before that I should give all my colleagues cookies, right?
Yeah, let's write them a little poem.
Really? Really?
Put it in there.
Like a little,
with kindness.
Almost like a fortune cookie with a poem by me.
Yeah,
but
I like that.
And it wishes them well or something nice. What would I say? What would the content be?
Yeah, just have a good day making shit I disagree with. Or
something about maybe a confession of sorts, like how much I've been hurt and how much I do really crave approval, and you've really crushed my soul, and but I'd still love you all. Something like that.
Yeah, you know what? That's one way of saying it. Or you could just be like, "Have a nice day."
Okay, I never leave it at that, dude, because I just can't. Have a nice day. I don't want to come off as sarcastic. First of all, that would be just inflaming them, right?
Yeah.
If I came
we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I guess. So I have one last question for you that I'm curious.
Yeah.
So let's say you're this almighty president of a university.
Yeah.
Some strange person puts you in charge. Actually, they wouldn't be that strange. It would be interesting. They put you in charge, and you're in charge of booking people, to have speeches and whatnot. Where is the limit to which people? What is the limit to who you would actually book on campus? Yeah, on campus.
Well, I would not be the one.
How far would someone have to?
I don't think that the university should be the arbiter of that. It should be the members of the university who decide if a group has money and they want to bring in a certain speaker. They should be allowed to do so. Then the speaker has the right of speech, free speech, that is guaranteed by the Constitution, and there are limits on that speech. One of the main limits is that speech cannot incite incipient violence. It cannot people cannot say, kill those bastards right there, right? They cannot try to rev up a crowd to go on a rampage. That's not allowed. That's actually not protected speech in the United States. They can have hate speech is actually permitted. And the problem with being the arbiter of that is that those who claim that something is hate speech can always up the ante or raise or lower the bar for what counts. And that's what I would not allow. If I were the president of a university, I would not allow activists to be the ones to be the arbiters of what is acceptable speech. I wouldn't allow it. I would allow the courts, the Supreme Court and the federal judges in that system to say what is allowable speech and what is not. You can't have activists running the show. You can't.
No. All right. That's the extent of everything. Is there anything else?
You've really plumbed the depths with me here, as usual.
Well,
you're the man.
All right, Dr.
High five, man.
High five. I learned.
Give me a high five. All right, buddy. Thanks so much.
All right, take care, man.
All right, bye-bye.